Hello, hello. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to the Woman to Woman show. We are so excited to have you here. I'm excited to have.
Hello, everyone. We're excited to have you.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We're excited tonight about our topic. This is going to be an excellent topic because a lot of times we give fathers a bad rap. So tonight we want to talk about fatherhood. So I'm going to just go around the room and we're going to get started because we want to use up all our time because the hour goes so fast. So I'm just going to go around the room and ask each of our lovely co-hosts, what was your relationship like with your father? In 30 seconds, we're just going to give a brief synopsis of what our relationship was like with our father so that we can know, other people can know that one of us you probably can relate to. So I'm going to start with Shayla. What was your relationship like with your dad?
Well, um, my relationship with my dad is good. But there's a lot of things that I didn't know about him as a father for a long time. We were separated for about 6 years, and that was during my teenage years. So there's quite a bit that we kind of missed. But as an adult, I've learned to understand a lot about what my parents, including my father, have gone through. So my relationship with my dad is pretty good.
Awesome, awesome. Let's take it over to Sheila.
Good evening, everyone. My dad was the consummate provider. Okay, so his job was to raise his family and take care of the home. And he was a father, he was a man's man. And we actually didn't establish a relationship until we became adults as children once we became an adult because again his job was to be the father. He wasn't our friend. His job was to raise us, make us productive adults, and while taking care of the household, seeing to all of our needs. So I really got to know my father and the man that he was and appreciated him as a father as I got into adulthood.
And your father was in the home with you.
Yes, he was in the home. My parents were actually married for 30 years before they divorced.
Oh, wow.
So we had the benefit. I have three siblings, and we had the benefit of having a two-parent household.
Awesome. Oh, we got to talk about that. That's so good.
Yes.
We're going to pass the mic to Theo.
So I am definitely a dad's girl. So my daddy was my heart. And, our relationship was one of, just, I would say that I get my spirit and my kindness and my warmth comes from my dad because my dad was a quiet, gentle, kind-hearted person. But I also was able to see how, you can get through anything, any adversity, because my dad demonstrated that despite whatever was going on in your life, he was able to get through it and conquer it and still, have a bright viewpoint about life. So like my daddy was my heart.
Oh, I love it. We're going to pass the mic to Regina.
Hi, good evening. My dad was in the house with us. And my dad and my mom were married for like 25 or 26 years before divorce. So he was hands-on and he was a provider, and I was the only girl, so I was a daddy's girl as well. But he taught me a lot of how to be, how to sustain, what to do, how a man's supposed to treat you. He did a lot of that for me. So I really appreciate my dad.
Awesome, awesome. So let me talk about my relationship with my dad. Well, my biological father lives in California now. He's 80 years old, and I love my dad dearly, but I don't know my father at all. I just know him that he's my biological father. When we see each other, maybe I've seen him maybe 20 times in my life from a child to an adult because he was in California, and I don't hold that against him because I want a lot of people to understand tonight that a lot of times as children we get caught in the crossfire of an adult of the adults, right? We get caught in the crossfire of the divorce. And my parents got divorced, I believe, when I was 5 years old. My mother left California with us, And I had a stepfather who was instrumental in my life, who was very instrumental in my life, and I loved him dearly. And he taught me a lot about life. He taught me a lot about men. But my father not, my biological father not being in my house, not being in my life, did affect me. But we're going to talk about that next. So let's talk about that. So let's talk about let's talk to Sheila and Regina first, since they had their dads in the home. Theo, was your dad in the home, or was he?
My parents were never married, but my dad was in the house at some point, right? But then I made certain decisions in my life to go live with my dad. Like in high school, I went to live with my father to go to high school. So I kind of had him in and out.
Okay, that's good. So let's talk to Sheila. Sheila, how did it affect you having that father figure in the home?
We grew up in a small town. I shouldn't say town, but in the city. And our situation wasn't uncommon. We were fortunate that we were able to purchase a house in the early 70s. My father worked. My mother was responsible for taking care of the household and raising the kids. So the street that we moved on, for the most part, you had your full nuclear families there.
Wow.
Whether there was one child or 6 or 7 of them, for the most part. So that was our normal.
Wow.
It was also the normal to see the fathers going off to work. Some of the mothers did work, but that was the way that everything occurred in that era. The father worked every single day. So with my dad, he worked the night shift. So we didn't get to see him too much during the day, because when we were home, he was sleeping. And when he came home, we were sleeping. But it was the thing. My mother was there. She had his lunch packed, and she had, when he woke up, she had his dinner ready. So he ate before he left. The weekends, though, what he would do is that he would get up, even though he just got home, in the early hours, but he would get up, make sure that whatever needed to be tended to around the house was tended to. If there were things that he needed to do with us, he would do that. And then he would also spend some time with us. As we were growing up, our first cousins were our best friends. So for the most part, we were always at one uncle's house or another, or cousin's house. So, but Saturday night and Sunday, that was his time. So
Wow.
whether my parents were going out during the better parts of their marriage, or if he was going out with his friends or with his brothers, that was his time. So we got a little piece of him on Saturdays, and then, Saturday night and the week and Sunday, it was time for him to go hang out. But he was home for Sunday dinner too.
Wow. Wow. And I'm saying wow because I've never experienced that. Right. And you probably, for you, like you said, that was normal.
That was normal.
Block, the father's going to work. That wasn't nothing I saw before. So I just want people to understand the dynamics of fatherhood. And I want us to have grace and mercy on the fathers who were not present. We're not here to bash at all. We're here to have understanding of why certain dynamics happen. And we want, like, there are some young women who don't have relationships with their dads, and some older women who don't have relationships with their dads. And I really want people to understand that sometimes things happen with adults, right? And I want people to understand also that sometimes we pick sides as children because we don't know any better, right? So we pick mommy, like my mommy's my everything. And I want young women to understand, and older women too, who may need this from my coaching standpoint, because there's some coaches in the building, that just because a person is a bad mate doesn't make them a bad father, right? So we see our father dealing with our mother from the standpoint of what he's getting from her, and that is a woman and a wife. And as children, boys and girls, we see our mother from the lenses of a mother. So we don't see the woman and wife side, maybe in the bedroom yelling or saying something or doing something. We don't see that dynamic. So the dynamic we see is, why would he treat my great mommy mother like that? Because he's dealing with woman and wife, and we're dealing with motherhood, a connection of maternal instinct for us, not necessarily for him. So Regina, tell us about how it was with your dad in the house and how it has affected you as an adult woman.
Piggybacking off what you said, that was definitely what that was in my house. But my dad was there, um, but he was that dad. He was a provider. He took care of us. However, I saw all me and my siblings. We saw all the arguing between my mom and dad, and somehow I jumped myself into it, trying to protect my mom.
Oh,
And as my dad passed, and my brothers and I, we had conversations about it, and they saw stuff too, but it was so funny because I was a woman, a girl, and they were the boys, and we never talked about it until my dad passed. But they had the same experience that I had, and I mean, if this is the woman show, we're just gonna keep it real.
please
My
do.
dad had a mistress, and he took me around his mistress.
Oh,
Mm.
That really affected me. But my dad was a provider; he took care of us.
whoa.
But that is the reason why I have so many walls up against men, and I'm having to learn at 62 to undo all that I've learned. What my dad hurt me, of what he did with my mom, and what I saw. And we were in that nuclear family. My dad was a white collar worker in the 70s. He worked in he actually worked for McDonald's, and he was like just maybe two blacks that was in executive offices. So it was a lot of pressure on men and black men back then as well. So
Wow.
it was a lot of dynamics that came into it. So
Wow. Wait a minute. We're not gonna skip over that. I have a whole movement called hashtag no sides. We gotta
yeah,
talk
so
about
it's a
this.
lot of unpacking. That's how I got, and I had to unpack, and I learned from you, Trey, that I had to stop blaming men for what my dad taught me, and I have to separate that. But so
Oh, you breaking up a little bit. But I just we really I really
I
want
found myself trying to protect my mom and going into that role where it really wasn't my role.
right, right. But I just want fathers who are listening now. Let's talk to the dads real quick. Let's talk to the fathers because they need to hear too. To any father that's out here listening right now, when you take your child around a mistress, a side chick, you are damaging your daughter. As innocent as you may think it is, you are putting thoughts in her little head. I don't care if she's 4, 5, 7, 9, 11. We think that children don't be understanding stuff. And then women, grown women, the little 5-year-old in Regina is processing still that my father took me around this other woman while he was married to my mother. What exactly does that mean? Right? Like, did my mother know you hurt my mother? So we want the fathers to understand if you're going to do dirt, and we hope that you don't. Hashtag no side chicken, everybody. Please, if you're watching from Facebook, YouTube, please hashtag no side chicken in the chat so we can share it on the screen. But if you are going to do dirt, and we hope that you don't, get the help that you need or whatever, please don't take your children around it. Don't put that burden on your daughter's shoulders to have a secret from her mother. You
Mm.
have to understand that you are teaching your daughter to be a liar. Omitting pertinent information is a lie. Regina, I just want to say thank you so much for your transparency. And I always say truth plus transparency equals healing. Because there's another woman out here who daddy took her around the mistress and affected her and how she responds to men and how she processes things. And I'm glad that you worked through that. So Shay, I know your dad was in the house too. Talk about how he affected you, or how the relationship with him was good, and what things you saw from that.
Yeah, I just have to clarify that because I said we were separated. And um, growing up, we grew up in Panama, in Bocas del Toro, Almirante. And my father was a mechanic, and my mom was at home with us. So, um, like previously mentioned, I grew up with both my parents up until the age of 10 when they decided to migrate to the United States. And so we were left with my grandmother and my aunt in Puerto Limon, Costa Rica. And for what was supposed to be
Talk that
one
talk.
year,
Hold up. Talk that talk. Say that one more time for me.
which part?
Where you grew up at?
I grew up. I was born in Panama, in Bocas del Toro, Almirante, Panama.
Yes, honey.
Uh, up until the age of around 9 or 10, and then we were brought to Puerto Limon, Costa Rica. And, and me and my siblings were there. What was supposed to have been 1 year while they were trying to get themselves straight here in the United States, turned into 6 years.
Whoa.
So I lived in a house with my siblings, which was three, two cousins, an aunt and uncle, and my grandmother, and it wasn't a lot of space. But that's another story. But for the first 10 years, I watched my father go to work, come home. Just like previously said, he took care of the home, took care of us, make sure that we had clothing, shelter, food. He played with us. I remember when he would come home from work and we would take his work boots off and his feet stunk, but it was a joke. We as children, we would just, he would make it as a big like play thing situation where, it was something that we would do, and we knew it was going to, bring laughter and fun, with our father. So I remember that of my father from that age. But between 10 and 16, there was that gap for not just my father, but my mother as well. But because we're talking about fathers, there was that gap where my father wasn't there.
Right.
And although we would always, there was every weekend that we had to go to this particular place, because back in those days, there was only one place that you could make international calls at a certain day and a certain time. So we would make that trek to this place where we would call to speak to my parents.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so it's
How did that affect you? That gap between. I mean, how did that affect you? I really want to know.
there was a lot missing. There was a lot of information that I was not given, because my aunt was more concerned that we wouldn't deal with boys, because the thought was, if you get a boyfriend, you get pregnant. What do I tell your father? Kind of thing. So there wasn't a father figure for those. And that's a pivotal time of a girl's life,
Yes.
between 10 and 16, that you want to have that relationship with your father or a male figure to help you. And I didn't have that during that time. So that did affect me as a woman, as I come to find out. So, yeah.
We're gonna go to Theo, but I'm gonna come back to you on that in like
Okay.
2 seconds. So keep that thought in your head about how it affected you and your decision making when it comes to relationships. All right, keep that, because I'm
Okay.
because y'all out here telling all the business, but I love it. So we're gonna go to Theo. Theo, tell me a little bit about your dynamic and how your father impacted you and the decisions that
So,
you make as a
so although my mom and dad weren't married, like my dad was there, and even when they were no longer like in a relationship, my dad was always around, right? So I have fond memories of my father. Like I remember my dad picking me up and me and him walking from Boston Road, for anybody that knows the Bronx, down to Webster Projects to visit my grandmother. I remember when my dad was living in Queens, him coming to pick me up, to take me out there to stay with him for the weekend or whatever. I remember when I made the decision, because I didn't want to go to high school in the Bronx, to go live with my dad, and he was like, fine, and he welcomed me. So I, had a different experience. And even when my parents were no longer in a relationship, they were still really good friends. Like even as an adult, like my mom still considered my dad to be like her best friend, although I don't know if my dad felt she was his best friend, but they had a good relationship. And I mean, I was blessed because although my dad wasn't in my household in the traditional way, my dad was a real important part of my life, and made it a point to be there, and also made it a point to make sure that I knew my siblings, right? Because he had children with another woman that he was with way before my mother. So there was like no cheating or anything. My siblings are like 10, 11 years older than me, but my dad also made sure that I knew my siblings, which is important to me.
Yes.
Because now as an adult, I have really strong relationships with all of my siblings.
Oh my goodness. I love that, Theo, because a lot of people don't understand the importance of the connection with the siblings once the relationship is broken. Those are still your brothers and sisters, and there's sometimes a longing, and you don't know what it is when your parents pull you apart from them siblings. I had a wonderful weekend this weekend, and I'm going to go to Regina in 1 second. I had a wonderful weekend this weekend with my father's side of the family, and I just want to stress this: my father not being in my house affected me because I felt insignificant. Like, why wouldn't he come get me? Why wouldn't he visit me? Why doesn't he reach out? Why doesn't he send me birthday presents? Does he know my birthday? So I overcompensated a lot with men because somebody was going to stay with me and I was going to feel important to some man. Some man going to just stay. I'm rather dying and all. Thank God through therapy and coaching, I'm in a different space. But I want parents to hear this tonight. I got to spend time with my dad's side of the family, my grown cousins, and one of his sisters, and her husband, and my aunt has been married for 56 years. I didn't know that there were people in my family because my mother's side of the family, there were really no healthy marriages, right? So I didn't know that there were healthy marriages and that my father's sister had been married for 50, my auntie had been married for 56 years. It's in my blood. I think that broken families and divorce was my destiny. And this weekend was so good because I went and spent time with them and they did Christmas pictures. I came, my cousin had pajamas for me. I was like, I ain't putting them pajamas on. She was like, yes, you are. And I want mothers to understand that just because the relationship breaks up with the father, your children need to know the other side of their family. And this is common. This is just normal that when parents break up, the children who are with the mother are more prone to see the mother side of the family. I cannot stress this enough right now to mothers who are listening. Your children need to know their father's side of the family. Your children need to know the gifts and the purpose that they have from that side of the family, that DNA. Another thing, my hair. I'm thinking I got it from my mama. My aunt has this head full of beautiful, wavy, gray hair. She took her ponytail out to take pictures. I said, well, maybe I didn't get my hair from my mother's side because my auntie got all this good hair. So I just want to say how important fathers are in your children's lives. We need to know both sides of the family. Please, I did the same thing to my children. I'm not even gonna lie, but it's just a pattern and learned behavior. So any mother who is listening, if your children's father side of the family lives close enough, or you can send them for the summer, please let them kids get to know their daddy side of the family. And another thing I learned about my cousins, my daddy side of the family just as crazy as my mama's side. I thought we got that from my mama too. But my daddy's side just as crazy as my mama's side. I had such a good time laughing. They loud. I thought, because my dad is really laid back and cool. Don't drink, don't smoke, never did none of this. But my cousins, not so much. I was like, oh, they been getting it in too. Like, oh, they curse. They said a curse. But, just important for kids to know both sides of the family. Gina, tell us a little bit about your relationship with your dad and how it impacts you as an adult.
It's funny you say that. I actually met my father when I was about 48, 49 years old. Yeah.
Wow.
So, all my life I felt like something was missing. And even though I had, my uncle was in my life, my grandfather, um, just for the sake of right now, I'll just say it was a different type of relationship. And it wasn't what I thought it should be, but being a child, you don't have a say so, right? And I always felt like, where was he? Why wasn't he around? So I always felt something was missing. And I'll tell you the truth, if it wasn't for me having faith or growing to trust in God, Yahweh, Jehovah, who y'all call him, I call him Yahweh. If I didn't have the faith as I got older to know that I had a purpose and a plan, I would have still been all kinds of busted and disgusted. But when I met him, we had some real heart to heart conversations. And I had to decide at some point, was I going to forgive what I had or didn't have or felt that I missed. And so I had at one of those conversations, I had to decide: are we going to move forward and embrace the relationship that we can have now? Because now I'm thinking, I'm a mom, I have children. He has 4 grandchildren he didn't know. And do I stop that from happening, or do I am I strong enough to be mature in this space? And forgiveness ruled out. So
Hallelujah.
because that happened, and because I did have that attitude, he shared a lot of things with me that I didn't know. Like
Oh,
my mom taught me a lot of things, but he filled in some of the gaps too. And I have a huge family that I've never met. When I tell you I have over 50 to 60 cousins, drop in the bucket. Like I have 10 aunts and uncles that I never got to meet in person until
wow.
I met my father. And I met about half of them since we've been in relationship. But I'm telling you, it's been a journey. And even at the age I am, you still don't know how much you need a dad. If you had him all your life, it's like that's your second nature. But when you have the opportunity to have him back or have that restoration in that relationship, he matters. So whether you are a young child, a teenager, an adult, full grown, a father is needed throughout all stages of their children and their adult children's lives. It
That is
matters.
powerful. Like that's just powerful. Like this is the dynamics of what each of us has gone through, whether our father was not in our life or whether our father was in our life, whether we was a daddy's girl or a fatherless daughter. It has impacted us in a way, right? And I want to go around the room and I want to ask, in one instance, and when it comes to dealing with relationships in men, I just want us to speak on how it has impacted you when it comes to dealing with men as an adult woman. And I'll start with you, Sheila.
Opposite of my father.
Oh,
Didn't particularly look for that provider. Didn't look for that man who was a family man, because I don't know that I really saw or appreciated or understood it as I
oh,
was growing up. So to me, that the guy that had the little bad boy streak in him,
yes.
that's what I gravitated towards. So
Was
it
it
was like
more,
you had the good girl who was very active in school and got the best grades, who always needed that guy who just had a little something, that little, whether it was the swagger or the talk, anything that my father would not approve, but not consciously aware of that.
would you
Mm.
think you were trying to get his attention by gravitating to the negative because he was quietly he was there but he wasn't there? Did you
He
just
was
want his
he,
attention?
he was quietly absent. So that's probably, I've never really thought about it, but probably looking for somebody who wasn't like my father, because I didn't really know my father. So I
Wow.
didn't know what to look for, and didn't know, because we didn't talk in our household,
Wow.
anything like that. So it was never instilled and ingrained in us, at least not the girls, that this is what you need to look for. Because
Wow.
my father was busy handling his business.
And I want to say this to the young ladies and the older women who are watching, because, like Regina said, her father just came into her life. I want to say this, and I have interviewed over 50 men on the Woman to Woman, I'm on the Men Hurt Too podcast. And I want to say that men have been taught not to talk, men have been taught not to express their emotions, men have been taught that you work, you provide, and that is your job. I want for especially young girls who are in the home with their dad, who are growing up in a home with a father who is present but absent. I want us to feel free, and for the women, and maybe I'll call my dad, right? If I'm gonna call y'all out, I'm gonna call myself out. Maybe I'll call my father tomorrow, have a conversation. Lord, help me, God. But I want us as women, young women, little girls who are listening, who are of a certain age, 17, 18, 25, in college, And for women like Regina who are just coming in, I want you to open the door to conversation. I want the 16-year-old girl in her home right now who might hear this, or whoever's an auntie that's listening, or a woman that's of a certain age, because this platform is for mature women. I want you to go talk to the young ladies in your life and say, go to your father and say, Dad, I need you. I need to talk to you. I need to hear from you. I need to be influenced by you, because they have not been taught. So you can be the door to open the door. You can be the conversation starter. We don't go to our father, so we can't really blame. Like Sheila, you didn't go to your father and say, Dad, I need you. Like, I really need to have a conversation. You just said, okay, he works, he goes, he comes, he goes to sleep. We weren't taught, but now we have to teach our younger generation that if only I had went to my father while he was out mowing the lawn. If only I had went in the kitchen when he was sitting down eating meatloaf and just said, Dad, can I talk to you for a minute? I love you. I just want to have a conversation with you. I want women and young girls, young women now to understand that you get to do that. You get to do, your father's been taught, and please have grace and mercy on your father. Not that we're excusing people from being accountable, but your father has been taught that, especially Black men, do not be emotional. They didn't get hugs from their mother. Their father wasn't in the house, so they're only going by what they knew. So I want to encourage you to just be the door that opens. And to the mothers who are listening, and then I'm going to pass the mic to the mothers who are listening right now. I want you to understand this. You can't tell a man to be a father and to do what he needs to do, but you can leave the door open for when he's ready. Because so many of us as Black women, we complain, he don't do this and he don't come around. And then when he comes around, we close the door because it wasn't in our timing. Because he's a bad spouse, a bad mate, doesn't make him a bad father. When he comes to his senses, open the door and let him in. What was up, Regina? You're up next, Regina. I'm sorry, because I was all in my zone just now, but y'all can stop me at any time too. Like, please and thank you. We co-hosting here. Regina, talk about your father a little too.
Oh, my dad, like I said, he was a good provider. He provided for us. He took care of us, but he had that woman on the side, and that impacted. But the thing about it, he taught me how a man is supposed to treat me. And
Wow.
so it was like a double, like, what are we doing here?
Wow.
Type of thing. So he taught me, took me out to dinner. He showed me, he traveled with me, and he told me the best things in life, but and how I'm supposed to react and how a man is supposed to treat me. However, on the flip side of that, I don't trust men. I have a lot of trust issues. That, and I just found out about that. So I built up walls against men. So when I say I have to unlearn everything, I have to forgive myself, because he did the best that he could. Or I mean, like I'm saying, I'm not excusing him. He did whatever he did, but my mom stayed, he stayed, and that was their relationship. But I had to take on, he was my father and I loved him dearly. But I don't want a man like my father. I don't want a cheater. And I cheated. If I want to be honest. And I learned, it's all learned behavior.
Let me cross my leg. Come on, girl. Come on, talk about that. Talk about that. Come on.
Yes. So I did that, and I cheated because I said, I'm gonna get you before you get me.
Oh, wait. Wait, I just want us to. We need this conversation because we don't want this to go one way. Like, women don't cheat. I cheated too, and my behavior came from the fact that my mom cheated, and I copied her behavior. But Regina, we have to understand too, ladies and gentlemen, there are some women out here who are cheating because they're copying their dad's behavior, or like Regina said, I'm gonna get you before you get me. You're not gonna do me like my daddy did my mama. Let me show you something. So what has changed the dynamic in your mind, Regina, when it comes to your thoughts about dating and men?
I had to forgive myself and give myself grace and mercy. And honestly, your hashtag
No side chicken.
No side chicken. I have to forget it. When I start following you, I was like, man, it was like you were just speaking directly to me. And like all that I had to just forgive and unpack and unpack. And I've cried and I've apologized. And I now I've taken those layers off. And even when I stopped cheating, I didn't trust. When I
Right.
was a old man, I'd be like, oh, I'll put up this big walls. So you can't even get through. I barely give brother a chance. So
That's
now
so cool.
I've learned that every man is not my father, every
Oh,
man is a cheater. And I have to, put my expectations out. And if you're not gonna treat me like the woman that I or the queen that I am, then that's it. I'm not lowering my standards. And if you don't meet my expectations, you're not for me. And that's not what my God has for me. So I will kindly wait until my God puts a man in my life that we do this thing together and show the generations, especially Black men and women, what true love is supposed to be about. And that everyone, and my sons, we've had this conversation. Oh, mom, men cheat, all men cheat. No, they don't.
oh, oh, that's a whole nother topic. That's a whole
Mhm,
nother show, girl. Write that
mhm.
down, please, for me, because we're gonna talk about that with the boys and all
Yes.
that. Now
Hmm.
I want to go to the daddy's girls, Theo, because I had a conversation with a couple of men that I interviewed who said there's a problem with fatherless daughters and there's a problem with daddy's girls because daddy's girls compare us to their fathers and think that we're supposed to do what their dad did, but I'm not your dad. I am your man and I'm never going to live up to your dad. And you're no longer a daddy's girl, you're my woman. How has your relationship with your dad, being that you were a daddy's girl and he did a lot for you, affected your dating process and how you process things with men?
I mean, I don't think that I ever felt that anyone had to be my daddy because I didn't think anybody could be my daddy, right? So that's the number one. The one thing that I did, that one expectation that I did set was you will never put your hand on me because my daddy never put his hands on me, right? You will never treat me a certain way because my daddy never treated me a certain way. But as far as, me expecting them to be my father or treat me like my father, that there was no expectation. I think the thing for me is not even recognizing it is that in a sense, I would say that I probably married my father, right? Because my dad was an alcoholic, and although he was more of in recovery more than he was an alcoholic, I ended up also marrying someone that was same kind-hearted, loving, great guy, but had a problem with alcohol, right? And I didn't even realize it at the time, right? That I, did that. But I would say for the most part, I think my dad really, set an expectation for me that there were certain things that I would not tolerate from a man when it came to how they either spoke to me or put their hands on me or anything like that. Not that anyone ever tried, but up front they knew, like, you're not going to treat me like that because that's not something that I experienced my father doing to my mother or my father ever doing to me, right?
Hmm.
Wow, wait a minute. There's a lot to unpack here because you just said some stuff too, Theo, and you said you married a man like your father, even though it was something that was not a positive thing about your father. Why do you think you were even attracted? Did you think you could save this man, or did you think you could, like? Why do you
Um,
think?
I don't think that I was looking to save him. I just think that he had qualities like my dad. Like my ex-husband, I tell anybody, like my ex-husband was like, if I was probably older when we were married, we probably would still be together because I would have probably been in a mature state and be able to kind of work through it with him. But my ex-husband was like, oh my God, adored me, treated me well, just was a really kind-hearted, nice guy like my dad. And
Oh,
I think that's what I fell in love with. Like I fell in love with a guy who really, like really, really loved me. Like, like there was no doubt in my mind that this guy really cared about me, loved me, and adored me.
Wow. Wow. Listen, I love this. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's listening. If you just tuned in, you're tuned into the Woman to Woman show on the New You Nation Network YouTube channel. If you're on Facebook, thank you so much for your comments. I see some comments. I see Shanice says, I've tried that route. However, my father lets his guilt stay distant, and I can't make a person talk to me, hang around me, or guide me if he doesn't want to. It took a lot for me to come to that reality. Yeah, sometimes we
So,
just have to, we can try, and sometimes it is not going to work out. But I always encourage to just leave the door open because sometimes it takes longer to actually, for people to actually forgive themselves. And
and can I say something to
yes,
that point? Is sometimes we feel like we want to have people talk to us, right? And sometimes you have to take a different route and not really, have a conversation, but sometimes you have to ask your parent, whether it's your mother or your father, to tell you about their lives. What
right,
were they like growing up? What did they go through, right? Because that also will give you an understanding as to what shaped them and how they may have interacted with you or not interacted with you. And it still may not make you feel any better, but sometimes that may get them to open up more so than having a conversation where you're like, you want to just ask them questions and ask them questions. Sometimes it's simply tell me what it was like being you growing up, right?
right.
What was your relationship with your mother or your father or your siblings or whatever?
Right.
And,
That's good stuff.
and
Go ahead.
that's so important. What you're saying is to have that conversation because most my father just passed away a few months ago, and while we started to find out things about him as an adult, because my father was fortunate enough to retire in his 50s, and he moved down to North Carolina while the rest of us stayed here in New Jersey. So once he retired, he just became free to talk. So he talked about a lot of the things that occurred while he was in the South. And we knew that there was some trauma there as well, but we just figured it had to do a lot with the racial tension and how he was brought up. But then now that he's passed and had sit there and have conversations with my uncles and they're starting to tell some stories, I'm learning a lot more about my father posthumously that I wished I had had some conversations with him to better understand it, because I think I also pigeonholed him, because while we grew up as a whole family, my father and my mother did not get along. It got to a point where they fought more than they did anything else, which ultimately led to divorce. But I always chalked up a lot of his actions because my mother was his first love. So that's why he was still pining away from her, for her, and that, it was hurting, not realizing that a lot of things stemmed from his childhood.
Yes. Sheila, you are so on point, and that's why we wanted to have this fatherhood conversation tonight. And Tracy says sometimes you have to forgive people who don't think they need to be forgiven. Listen, we are talking about women. We pour into each other, right? We have the New You Nation, our membership site, where we talk to each other, where we encourage each other, where we come in and say, hey, I'm not having such a good day. Could y'all pray for me? Or we'll come and we'll be like, yo, these kids is driving me crazy, or whatever the conversation might be. But men have been taught to suppress their emotions for years and years and years. There are men, it could be my father, it could be Sheila's father, it could be Theo's father, it could be Shay's father, it could be Regina's father, who was beat by their parents, who were molested by somebody, who was treated bad, who was bullied in school. So when we don't know the dynamic of how our father was raised or the things that he has been through, and we see these behaviors, we have to get to the root of the behavior. And what we do is we shun them and we talk bad about them and sometimes we can't get to the root and we can't talk to them, but we just have to say it's something so deep that hurt him, or something that happened that he can't talk about. So I'm going to give grace and mercy and still offer a conversation every now and again. And to say one thing you could do to a man is to be gentle, kind, and say, Daddy, I love you. Like, no matter what, I love you. Whether he says it back or not, that's not the point. But Dad, I love you. And a lot of times, I'm trying to just tell everybody that's listening tonight, a lot of times we are punishing our fathers for our mothers, right? Just because he was a bad spouse does not make him a bad man. Just because he was a bad husband does not make him a bad father. And so many times we lump the whole thing together. And a lot of times, too, and I know this firsthand from family, from the multiple women that I coach and counsel and talk to, that women use anger and bitterness and they keep their children away from fathers, and the children do not find out until they are adults. We have to stop as women, and I'm saying this, and this is not to knock the women, and men have to step up as fathers and remove, and men, we know it's hard to deal with some of us. Let me say that, and I'm gonna give the screen so we can all chime in on this one and give our thought on this one. I know I'm a mother and I've been in a relationship, and I have my two oldest children with my first husband, my only husband, but my first husband, and my youngest son with his dad. And the two different men that they are, I had to adjust and make sure that it was about my children and not about me. Because it was turmoil with one of them. And I began to use that before I got the help that I needed, to be mad at, oh, if he ain't never got to come over here. But in the last 2-3 years, I'm like, listen, I need your help, dude. I can't do this by myself. So I had to humble myself to say, I don't know what you was going through because of our breakup. I processed it. I was mad. So he had to go through a process too. So I want women to understand, let's not use our children as leverage. And Sheila, I'll go to you next because I know you had, no, I'll go to Regina next because I know Regina has children. And then I'll go to Sheila, and then I'll bring another question around to Shay and Theo, right? Because I know they got the daddy-daughter thing. They don't have children. But Regina, how was the dynamic with your son's fathers? Because this is about fatherhood and how you handle that.
Oh, my two sons, I was married to my husband, and we split up. And again, we went back and forth for years, getting back together. And this one time, when we said we were going to get back together, he comes over and says, I'm with someone else. I'm in a relationship. Now, after spending like 3 or 4 trying to get us together, now this one weekend you come. So I use that as leverage. So I try to use my kids, just like you said, well, if you're not going to be with me, you're not going to be with the kids, because he wanted to take the kids around his new girlfriend, whatever. But I saw the hurt because I used my oldest son as a pawn one time.
Oh,
and I dared him to go with his father. And because I was angry at his father, and I saw my child, and I would never want to hurt my child like that again. And I had to let go. And I just decided at that point, you know what? Your sons are going to see you, it's going to be a relationship. And I can't, put my feelings in it no more. But when I saw my son, and I think he was about 10 years old, break down and cry, and he didn't know what to do, and his father's calling him a punk and this, you're going to side with your mom. It was just too much hurt and too much anger between me and his father. So we got beyond that. My sons didn't have a great relationship with their dad. Their dad was a provider and threw money at them. Pretty much, if there was a problem, he was going to solve it with, I'll come over and bring some money. So now my sons have a relationship with their dad, but I let them, have their own relationship. But there was a time that I did use that anger, because I was angry at him, and I used my kids as a pawn. But that was not good at all.
oh my God. Thank you. So your transparency tonight, Regina.
Yes.
You are freeing the captives tonight, girl. You freeing the captives. You said something so powerful just now. Women, when he come and say, I'm seeing somebody else, that gut punch, that karate chop in the throat, will send you reeling into anger, because again, this is
a very angry Black woman I turned into.
Yeah, we have to, because a breakup is the death of a relationship, right? And we go through the grieving process. And when a person comes to you and says, I'm seeing somebody else, you're still mourning, you're still in the grieving process. So there's 5 stages of grief. You go into that anger because you already been in denial, like, you know what, we gonna get back together. we got some time. We need some space. I'm gonna do this. Then you go into the bargaining with God. God, please just bring my husband home. And then when the old boy come and say, I'm seeing somebody else, you what? No, that's not what we doing. I'll kill you first, and you ain't gonna see these kids. So thank you again for your transparency. Sheila, how was that dynamic of father and mother for you and that co-parent thing of making sure it wasn't a leveraging situation?
My ex-husband and I split up when our son was an infant. So our son never knew us to be together.
Oh.
Ironically, in the early years, though, he knew that we were husband and wife. So the fact that we didn't live together didn't matter to him. It's just that mommy and daddy are husband and wife. In the beginning, my son's father didn't have a lot to do with him. He was going through his own personal things, and having a new child, because he also has two older sons. But he wasn't really there present for our son like he should have been in the early years. And one of the things that I learned outside of the household was, my sister became a young mother. I had friends who were co-parenting or are constantly getting in fights with their children's father. And one of the things that I learned was that you can't force somebody to be a parent. So all I could do was just be the best parent that I could be for my son. And probably did I try to overcompensate? I'm sure that I did, but I never spoke ill of his father, because I knew that if there was going to be a relationship, it had to be on their terms. I could not interject in that. And that was something that the two of them would have to work out. But at some point, my ex-husband, the flip switched, and he became the greatest dad for our son that I could have asked for. I didn't always agree with it. We have different parenting styles. I didn't agree with some of the things that he did. But that was a conversation between the two of us.
Come on, Jesus.
My son was very fortunate. And it broke my heart, though, because there was a time when my son did say, "Did you and daddy break up because of me?"
Oh.
And where that came from, I have no idea. I could never tell you, but I just had to explain to him that, adults go through some problems, and that sometimes mommies and daddies can't stay together, but it had absolutely nothing to do with you, because you were brought into this world out of love.
Oh, that's a conversation, right? Thank you so much, Sheila. If you didn't hear anything else from Sheila tonight, let your children know that nothing that goes on between adults has anything to do with any child that's in the home. The breakup, the fights, because children will think, and Dr. Phil said this best, children will make everything their fault. Oh, it's 8:56. Okay, so we're going to have to do our final thoughts. See how fast the time, ladies, we're going to have a meeting about our time and what we about to do with this, because our time is up, and we want to be mindful, and we want to be professional and not ghetto, because y'all know I'm from the hood, and we want to be mindful and professional that this show is over at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and people want to go to bed or got things to do. So we're going to go around the room with our final thoughts, and I'm going to start with Theo.
So what I will say quickly is,
Theo,
can you hear me?
Yeah, wait. I want you to tell your final thoughts, and I want you to tell everybody where they can find you as well.
Okay. So what I will say as far as final thoughts go is that, not discounting what anyone that's listening has gone through with their father, because, we all have experienced something different, and we were probably able to work through our things. There are some people that are not able to do that. But what I would say to anyone is, if I would get anything to be able to talk to my father today, especially because of the way that I lost him. Like, I found my father in his apartment and he was dead, right? And so that was my last memory of him, which I don't hold on to because I have so many other beautiful memories of him. So what I would say is not discounting what people may have gone through with their fathers. And I know that you may find it challenging to have a conversation or to build a relationship. I would say just reconsider that. And even if it takes getting help from someone to help you do that, because there's not a day that goes by that I wish I could not speak to my dad.
Wow.
And so where anyone can find me is on Instagram at Theodora Carter 428. On Facebook, I am Theodora Carter simply, and my website is www.theodoratcarter.com.
Theo. Girl, you about to take us to the crying mode. Don't do that. But I do love what you said, that if your father is alive, if your father's like, my stepfather has passed away. We didn't even get to the dynamic of step parents, but we're going to do another show on this because I see that it's necessary from the comments. But if my stepfather was alive and I was supposed to go see my stepfather the night he died in the early morning hours, that day I was supposed to go see him. I was pregnant with Steven. I wasn't feeling well, and I talked to him on the phone, and he said, listen, just go ahead to sleep. You come see me tomorrow. I'll cook you breakfast. We'll talk tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. And that is one of the biggest regrets that I have, that if I just would have gotten in the car and just took that time to drive, I would have gotten a hug. I would have spent those last hours with him. So, like Theo said, if your father is alive, I know it's hard. I know some things your mama didn't told you that about your dad that might not be true, some stuff you just don't understand. All you have to do is lead with love. It don't have to be no drawn out comment. You just say, Dad, I love you. I just want to say, call and say, I love you. So thank you, Theo. So we'll go to Shay next for her final words.
Well, my final words is that either we're going to have to extend this or we're going to have to break this up into subjects, because there's a lot that could be said about fathers. But I will say, I want to speak to the young adults and children that may understand, that may or may not see this, that there are things that you don't understand as a child that you begin to understand when you become an adult and you start to experience life for yourself. And then you begin to understand what your parents, your father, your mother, you're talking about fathers, but what your father might have had to go through in order to take care of you and not take care of whatever the situation may be. But you may not understand right now, but know that as you experience life, that you will begin to understand and see things, and just give your father grace. Just give him grace.
I love this so much. Just give him grace. Like we give, and we just give fathers such a hard time because of, we just don't understand. And like I said,
Just don't understand.
I interviewed 50 men, and the thing that they shared with me showed me that, one, men are human beings first, and they don't get that. Black men don't get that grace from anybody. So we're gonna move on and let Gina take her give her last thoughts, her final thoughts. We can't hear you.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now we can. Yes.
Okay. I have to agree with Shayla that we all need some grace and mercy as it relates to our fathers. We don't know their.
So we lost her. So we're gonna go to Regina, and Regina's gonna give her final thoughts.
Yes, I agree to grace and mercy. I love my dad. He taught me a lot of things. Um, that whole relationship I got in between him and my mom. What I mean by that, I saw things, and he did things that he didn't do, but I don't know what he went through. And I mean, my story is a lot with my parents, especially my dad. This is a whole nother topic. If I open up, it just will go. But my dad, to give you a little tidbit about him, his mom, he was born out of wedlock, and his mom was a, not to speak ill of my grandmother, but she was dating a married man. So maybe that's where it came from. I don't know. But
Mistress.
yeah, she was a mistress too. And my dad's dad rejected him because he had a whole family and we never knew our grandfather. So
Wow.
it's just a lot. So you have to take on it's just a lot, especially in a black family. And there was a lot of secrets. So
Yes.
those secrets. So, but my dad was open enough to tell me because one time I asked him about it, and it broke his heart. He told me his dad rejected him, and that's
Oh,
why he tried to give us so much love. But then he also did, he cheated too. So I don't just give him grace and mercy, and just be understanding and be there for them, and be a child. Don't try to
wow.
get in a relationship. If it's a mother and father, I mean a child and parent relationship, let it be there. But what I did is I took it beyond that. I call myself protecting my mom, but then that's what you do. So you have to
Your
now.
your father, your grandmother was a mistress.
Yes.
Wow. Whoa. See how this stuff trickles down, and we
Mhm.
be judging our father. Like, how do you even process the fact that my mother was sleeping with somebody's husband and I was conceived?
Mhm.
How do you even process that in your own little head to your whole grown life? My mother was sleeping with somebody's husband and got pregnant with me. So I am the mistress's child. Grace and mercy, please. Listen, we
Mhm.
might do another fatherhood thing. We'll talk about
Mhm.
Sheila. I'm passing the mic to you because
Yeah, this is deep and this is good. But I just have to say, it's a little bit of what everybody else has said too, like they're talking about thinking about him every day. Trey, you the what if, and it's just like the same thing. What if I had gotten in that car forget about making future plans?
Mhm.
What if? And every day. But I think one of the things that I had to learn is, again, we became friends. He was still my father, but we became friends as we got adults. And I realized I had to let my daddy be who he was.
mm,
I It was no room, and I had no right to try to reinterpret his life, or try to reinvent him into the man I thought he should have been or wish he had have been. I learned to let him be himself, and I also learned that every conversation we had, I made sure that I ended it. I was the one that came out and said, "I love you,"
mm,
because we didn't have that in our household growing up. We didn't talk about love. We didn't hear my parents say that to each other, and our parents certainly didn't say it to us. That didn't mean that they didn't love it. But again, there's no blueprint to parenting.
yes,
So I learned as an adult that I had to let him know, if nothing else, that I loved him.
Mhm.
there's no blueprint to parenting. Lord
Yes.
Jesus, let's try to get Gina's final word in. Come on, Gina.
Grace and mercy, that's what I was going to say. Just grace and mercy, and to forgiveness to your father, or if that you don't need to forgive him, just enjoy him and enjoy the memories. And the younger you won't understand certain things, but the adult you can learn a lot. So just be present to the fact that we go through stages in our maturity, and so do our fathers. So
Yeah.
hopefully, you can have that opportunity to have those conversations that you didn't have when you were a child.
Yes, and my final thought is our parents don't punish your parents for being caught in the crossfire of their life. There's no handbook to life. There's no handbook to parenting. Sometimes relationships between mothers and fathers don't work out. And unfortunately, the children get pulled in different directions, and the two parents are still trying to learn themselves. They
Mhm.
don't they was our age when we first had children, when we were trying to when we became parents. I had my first son at 25. I didn't know what I was doing. So we just have to really just understand that I don't believe anybody's father is doing anything intentional to them. That's the one thing that we must understand, that no matter how much or how hard we try to crucify them, talk bad about them, I believe that all of our parents love us, all of our fathers love us. They may not know how to express it. They may have got turned off because the mom wouldn't let the father come see the kid, or the mom was horrible to the dad, or just the dynamic of that adult relationship was so toxic that sometimes it may have been best just to let go. So if your father is alive and you feel like you want to have a conversation with him, do that. And if you feel like you've exhausted the possibilities, say, I love you one last time, move forward, but just always leave the door open in case your dad does come and say, you know what, I'm getting older or whatever. I had an epiphany. I was in an accident, but I love you. But you make the gesture to just say to your dad, Dad, I love you. I love you no matter what, because men need it. And again, Black men have been tortured. Black men have been abused. Black men have been disregarded since slavery days. It has carried over into fatherhood. And the more grace and the more mercy and the more conversations that we have about this like this is going to help us. And we need to pass this on now to the young fathers. There are broken homes with 21-year-olds and 25-year-olds and 18-year-olds and 32-year-olds. We have a voice. We have a platform. We are aunties, mothers, sisters. We need to go and talk to our young men to say, you have the right to see your child. I know things didn't work out with old girl, but it's okay. Don't stop trying for your children, because sometimes you just don't know what you just don't know. So again, thank you everybody for tuning into the Woman to Woman show. We are so happy that you allowed us in your life. It is a privilege to be in our life, but it is definitely a privilege to be in your life. So we will see you guys next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the New You Nation Network. Please tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. And next week, please join us, because we'll be talking about friendship betrayal. Have you ever been betrayed by a friend? And how is it affecting you as an adult? How do you deal with friendship with women and friendship with men? So tune in next week, because it's going to be all live. So thank you again. Thank you, Shay. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Theo. Thank you, Regina. We love you. Good night, and we will see you next week. Peace and blessings.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.